listening to the Compass Podcast. We navigate people to God each week by discussing the latest message from our series and hope you find the encouragement through the conversation.
Well, welcome to the Compass Podcast. My name is Brooks, the online campus pastor, and we have just kickstarted our series at the movies at Compass, and we love this series. It's so much fun. So we're hoping for the next 4 weeks that we have an opportunity for you to continue the conversation with us as I have some special guests on the podcast to talk about what we heard on Sunday. And this past Sunday was so much fun because we talked about Top Gun Maverick. And to discuss this movie and the message we heard on Sunday with me is Brandon Beard. And Brandon is our executive pastor of campus ministries here at Compass. We have Drew Bridges, one of our Colleyville student pastors. And with us is Mitch Sugg, our Roanoke campus associate pastor. Guys, welcome to the Compass Podcast. Really glad that you're here to talk about this movie.
Glad to be here.
Pumped. I'm really disappointed we didn't get a call sign. I thought we were going to get call signs.
Okay, yeah. So if you, right on the spot, if you had a call sign, what would it be? Mitch, go.
Oh, man.
Don't think, just do.
I don't know.
Bro, how do you not have a call sign?
Because I just watched Maverick not that long ago. I'm one of those guys. I know you're going to roast me for not watching the movie.
Maverick says, don't think, just do.
Don't think, just do.
Sorry,
let's go.
Just do. Call sign. I don't have one.
Boring. Brandon,
Call sign Ahsoka.
you want us to call you Ahsoka?
What does that mean?
That's a Star Wars show right now on Disney
okay.
Plus. It's incredible. But I don't want to deviate from the Top Gun
Let's
theme.
not do
I'm just
that.
saying though, if we're going to do this podcast about Top Gun, I thought it would be a good idea if we all had a call sign.
Ahsoka.
Okay.
Not that we have to refer to ourselves in that way. It's
Maybe
kind
we
of how
should.
that works.
Maybe that would be really appropriate.
There's
for
no
this.
way I'm saying Ahsoka right after the first 30 seconds of you saying
that's
it.
fine. That's fine.
I'm going to forget.
That's fine. She's one
Drew,
of the
call
she's one of the
sign.
greatest Jedis.
Shooter.
Mitch,
Come
come
on.
on.
Responder.
Responder.
Nerd.
I haven't thought about. I'm going to say wolf dog.
Wolf dog. I like it.
We got wolf, bird dog, wolf dog.
Bird
It's the
dog.
first thing. I'm not going to change. Wolf dog.
Was Geek Squad taken? Is that why?
So Ahsoka.
Yeah.
We have Ahsoka, Shooter,
Shooter.
like Shooter McGavin.
Yeah.
And we've got Responder.
Because I respond to everything so well.
Oh, he took this. He made that real serious.
All right,
That's good.
Let's keep going.
Well,
That was
listen.
fun.
So
Can I change mine to Disciple? Sorry.
Move on. We're gonna
No.
No, you can't. So, really awesome. My first question is: did you guys see this in the theater? Like Brandon, okay. Has anybody seen the original Top Gun in the theater around this table?
No. Brandon's the only one old enough to do that.
That's not even
That
a
was
fair
kind of a
question.
rhetorical question.
Yeah, I'm the old guy. Of course, I saw it in the theater.
He was probably took his youth students there and what was
No,
it?
I didn't do that. I didn't do that because of the love scene, but it was not a youth group worthy movie. That's why we're doing it for At the Movies. When we did it this past weekend, we had to cut those out.
Yeah. But you saw. What were your initial thoughts when you first saw it? Was it-
Everyone who watched that movie, when you walked out of the theater, you went home and you were like, I'm joining the Navy. Like everyone was like, I'm going to be a fighter pilot, which I was like a big football player. I was like, I don't think I'll fit in the cockpit. I don't think I'll fit in the deal. But like everyone did. Back then, that was like, and they even said back then when that movie came out, that the amount of people that joined the military after that, it was astronomical. It was like a huge recruiting thing. For
Yeah.
them. It was crazy. So at the time, it was a big deal. And I remember wanting to be Tom Cruise and have a motorcycle and fly a jet. And I found out that when you join the military, not everyone gets to do that.
Well, the original Top Gun was pretty groundbreaking.
It was.
It was a big movie, and for a long time, they were planning on doing a sequel, and then they decided, no, we're not going to do this. And then at some point, Tom Cruise went ahead and he was like, all right, let's go ahead and do this. And man, it broke all kinds of box office records. Did you guys see it in the IMAX?
Not
Or in the
IMAX.
theater at all?
Nope.
No,
I'm boring.
yeah.
Brandon saw it. Did you
I saw
see it?
I saw it like 6 times in the theater. But I'm an empty nester. This is what we do.
Gotcha.
We go to movies, we read books, we reminisce about the past.
Yeah, that's what you do.
That's what
I
you
wait
do.
till it goes on a streaming service
Yeah.
and I lay in bed.
Yeah.
And I watch it.
Yep.
Well, I didn't see it until like last week, and I loved the original.
Yeah.
Just because I love 80s movies, like I love Footloose and Top, all those things.
Preach.
It's so good. But so this movie takes place more than 30 years after Maverick graduates from Top Gun, right? And so Maverick, he's this decorated test pilot whose repeated insubordination has kept him from becoming flag rank, which is essentially when you become senior enough to be entitled to fly a flag to mark the position from which the officer exercises their command. So, and eventually he's asked to mentor a new generation of Top Gun graduates, including Bradley Rooster Bradshaw, who's the son of Nick Bradshaw, a.k.a.
Goose.
Goose. That's right. Goose.
Talk to me, Goose.
Talk to me, Goose.
Sad. It's a sad movie.
It really is.
It's a sad movie.
It's terrible. But like together, they basically face this intense aerial challenge and go through their personal struggles, testing their courage and skills in kind of like this high stakes world of military aviation.
Man,
Really
Wow.
intense.
it's a lot of big words.
A lot
right
of
there.
lot of big words.
So smart.
But there's some really interesting facts about Top Gun Maverick that I have to share here because this is really crazy. So to create the illusion that the actors were piloting the jets during the flying scenes, the producers paid the Navy $11,000 an hour to fly the F-18. Like that's just, think about how much time they spent filming. $11,000 an hour to film those scenes.
It's a chunk of change.
That's a ton of money. And for the actors, crews designed a 3-month boot camp to train the actors with flying roles to get them used to aerobatics and high G-forces, as well as build the spatial awareness they would need to operate the camera equipment. So they had to operate their own camera equipment in the jets.
They were up there with like GoPros.
Yeah. Some of the training it's nuts. Some of the training was required by the Navy for passengers and tactical jets, including underwater evacuation. But the actors had to learn lighting, cinematography, and editing to properly run the cameras, which is just nuts because, as the producers were saying, they said when they're up there in the jet, they have to direct themselves, essentially. So I just think that was crazy. And they had more than 800 hours of aerial footage shot for the film, which exceeds the combined footage shot for the films in The Lord of the Rings.
Sheesh.
Man, top.
Isn't that nuts?
How many times do you think they got up there and forgot to hit record? It's like, crap, run the scene back.
You got to come back.
They like put the VHS tape back in it and they recorded over it.
Yes.
When they had recorded from last time. Yeah. I don't think they were using VHS, by the way.
I don't think so either.
Okay. VHS is an old model of tape. Okay. For all of you.
I got you.
Do you know?
I'm not that young.
Oh, man. We had so many VHS tapes as a kid.
I had Top Gun on VHS.
Yeah.
I was telling you right now. It was awesome.
But anyway, the movie's fantastic. The story is really deep. But, as we talked about on Sunday, there is a lot of lessons to come out of this film. I think that's very relevant for us as believers. And a lot of what Cruise goes through, or Maverick rather goes through, is kind of overcoming the past, right? The impact of the past in our lives could be really difficult to overcome. And I think Top Gun highlights kind of the lasting impact of a tragic event on Maverick's life and how he overcomes that. So how, like as believers, how can we deal with the effects of tragedy?
I mean, I think if we're being honest, we at some point in time we'll all experience it. We'll all experience tragedy at some point in time. And I don't think it's about if it's going to happen to you, it's when it happens to you. And from experience, I've lost both my parents. My kids had heart surgery. Been through a lot of quote unquote what society would deem as tragedy. But from a Christian perspective, we just have to know that that's part of life. I think it's just like it's John 16:33. in this world you will have trouble.
Yeah.
But remember, or be courageous. I've overcome the world, is what Jesus says to us. And I just think that that's an important thing. I know it's a cliche thing to say, but I think it's important for us to live our lives in light of tragedy, that usually our deepest pain produces our greatest work. And so if I've got a lot of tragedy, I'm usually going to produce something from that tragic moment or tragedy that's in my life.
Wow. Yeah, this is really good.
Yeah, I co-sign that. I think understanding where Jesus is during our hardest seasons is super vital. And similar to you, I've gone through some things that society would probably deem, yeah, that was a pretty tragic thing. And my wife and I lost our first daughter in 2020. And I remember going through that season, and it, I think I kind of had lingering effects after, like, it took me about a month to kind of realize what had actually taken place, the loss that I had experienced, the toll that it was going to take on me, the toll that it was going to take on my wife, like those types of things.
Yeah.
And so how we processed through that was, first of all, I didn't try to, I think at first I did try to run from it, almost just like ignore that it even happened. But then once I embraced it, like, and just, for lack of better terms, said, hey, the next couple months are going to suck really bad. It's just like, it is what it is. It's going to suck really bad. But once we get through the sucky part of it and understand that our life has to still go on, we're able to look back on and see all the moments in where I could actually see where Jesus was in those moments. So getting through tragedy or tragic moments in life, oftentimes I think you just have to allow them to run their course, and I've seen people in my life who've experienced loss, and it sometimes takes them 2 years, depending on the significance of the loss. It takes them a really long time to just get through the sucky of it and try to imagine life beyond the tragic moment. But then once you're through that, and you have to operate, and you have to continue on. You know what I mean? Like, your days still go on. You still have a Monday through Sunday to get through. So I think there's a real season of life that you have to just recognize that. But then you're able to kind of look back on those seasons and go, man, like, actually, through the craziness of this, I can actually see the hand of God now. I can see where Jesus was, like, navigating me and moving me through that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So.
Yeah, I think too that I think we spend a lot of our life. I know I've spent a lot of my life, and I have regrets on this, trying to avoid tragedy. Just like being so obsessed with, like, okay, how can I avoid, and being like stressed out, with my kids or whatever. I want them to avoid this. I want them to avoid this. And it's like, why am I spinning my wheels so much trying to avoid tragedy? It's going to happen. And I'm not trying to say that like fatalistically, like, bad things are just, but it's true. Bad things are going to happen. And it's all about, and I think, all of our campus pastors, when they did this message, alluded to that whole idea. It's how you respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you respond to that. And that's the key. In Drew's situation or Mitch's situation that you guys both just talked about, you've had to respond in a healthy, right way to the things that have happened to you. And I've had to do the same. And when you don't is when you hurt, and then you hurt other people, and it just perpetuates that pain, and it turns into a even bigger mess. And it's silly, people will say, oh, this is silly. We're talking about a movie about a fake fighter pilot, who made 2 movies, and that is what it is. It is silly. It is funny.
Yeah.
The reason those movies resonate, both Top Gun movies, specifically Maverick, is just that people resonate with the whole idea of tragedy happening and trying to get over the past and not being able to let go. And it's just part of it. That's just part of life. And people really resonate with the story of these movies, not so much the fighter pilot part of it. They don't, that's not their experience. We're not like, lost a friend,
Right.
when I was flying, fighting the Russians back in '84, that's just not, it's not reality. But
Right.
But his reality is people do have this tremendous loss, right? Of a relative, a mom, a dad, a daughter, a friend. And it's like, or it's something else. It's tragedy of just failure,
Yeah.
you know, a pain.
Yeah.
And you just keep going back. There's things in my life I've had a counselor tell me before, like, are you going to forgive yourself for that? Or are you going to keep bringing it up?
Yeah.
Are you, you know, because you
Wow.
got to decide. You got to decide.
There was a really great line from the message on Sunday. They said, nobody moves forward well while hanging on to the past. So what practical steps or strategies have you guys found effective in sort of releasing past hurts and moving forward in life?
I think for me, like I had to look, I'm a big like visual learner. And so some of mine is like, I would write stuff and put it on my mirror in the bathroom. And so like, I think in order to get over the past, I had to look in the mirror. And I always thought that if I'm going to move forward, it's got to start with the person looking back at themselves.
Yeah.
And so I would do that often. And then, and so for me, if tragedies happened or if anything's ever happened in my life, I can look at my past or I can learn from my past, but I can't live there because living there, the only thing it's going to do is keep me from where I feel like God wants me to go in my future.
Yeah.
And for me, I just had to look in the mirror and say, okay, Mitch, these things have happened to you. Some by life and some by choice. And until I identified the ones that were by life and by choice, I was like, okay, then just life happens to me. But some of the things that have happened in my own life, because I just made terrible decisions with my life.
Yeah.
So I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, hey, it's time to move on. It's time to pick yourself up. And that's just how I am as a person. That's how I learn. That's how I view things. It's how I visualize things. And it's helped me move forward into where I am here today, even at Compass working here. I think if I would have allowed my past, to continue to come up into my life, I would not be working at Compass today. And there are tons of reasons that we could go on about for a whole nother podcast, but I don't think I would be working here at Compass with you guys today if I allowed my past to determine my future. And there was a time where I would have said, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve to pastor, and I don't deserve to be leading people. But I had to look in the mirror and say, you know what, who does God say I am? And so I'm forgiven, I'm loved, I'm cared for. And that's how I deal with it. And that's how I've always dealt with it. And I move on. I can't live in the past. It's a struggle for me.
You have to like choose every day that you're going to move forward in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and not to get like, super like spiritual about it. I think oftentimes we're like, oh, the enemy's always reminding me of my past. And I'm like, man, sometimes you just made a stupid choice and it really wasn't the devil to remind you of it. You were dumb.
Yeah, or your consequences are reminding you every day, right?
And I think that there is a choice. And there is a choice to either stay that way or move forward. But I will say this for me, and I can't speak for everybody, for me, without moving forward, the only thing I would have done with my life, I'm not to say that I don't struggle with these things, but I would have lived depressed. I would have lived with a lot of anxiety. I would have lived with a lot of fear. It's not that I don't struggle with those things from time to time. It's just that when I look in the mirror, I see now a guy who is called, who's been set right, who has favor on him, not like a weird favor, but that God has designed and put me in a place to influence people in a way that I never thought I would be able to. Mm-hmm. And I had to accept, yes, these things happened to me because my choices, but these things do not define my future.
There's some people listening to this. You cannot seem to break free from the past.
Yeah.
And it's because you need more than like a motivational talk or something on your mirror. You need help.
Yeah.
You got an alcohol problem. You can't just go to church every week and pray it away. Like you're going to have to go to AA. You're going to have to go through the 12 steps. You got a sexual addiction, you're going to have to go to SA and you're going to have to go to meetings and work through it, because you can't just sit there at home and go, well, I just can't get over it. And God just doesn't seem to be doing, I think sometimes we can over spiritualize that, like Mitch was saying, and say, like Mitch was saying, we can just be like, oh, God can set me free from my past. That's true. And you hear a preacher say that you can be set free, it's like you can be, and God does do that. At the same time, sometimes you need help. You need some antidepressant medication, or you need a counselor, or you need to go through AA.
Or you just need people.
Yeah.
You need people.
You need community.
Who are,
You need a circle.
Who are in alignment with
Yeah.
you. Like when Drew first joined our staff, Drew, he doesn't know this, but Drew was posting about running. And so I've always been a runner, but a guy came on staff and started posting about running. And I was like, oh, I can't. He made me better just by saying, hey, I'm going to go out and do this. Yeah. And it influenced the way that I lived my life.
Yeah.
We had a commonality, and that may have been running. And I think that people whom oftentimes fight with this idea of like, I can never get past my past, it's because the people in their alignment, the people that they have aligned themselves with, are not helping them discover their assignment for their future. Yeah. And I think those two things right there go hand in hand at all times. Like alignment and assignment, they're huge. And without them, without the proper alignment, your usually assignment is way off. You go, when your car's off direction, when it's out of alignment, you drift. And if you drift the wrong way and you get a flat tire, it can cause a flat tire. It could cause you to wreck. It could cripple your entire life when you're out of alignment, not only with God, but with your circle and people. And so when Drew came on staff, he had no clue, but we had already I had already aligned myself with Drew just because of running.
That's cool. Awesome. Did not know that. Yeah, I had a conversation with a guy. I will add something now that you. I had a conversation with a guy in our church who he's been coming for about a year now. And it's crazy how, we talk about this a lot and how God's timing is perfect, and it is. But sometimes when you can actually see the practicality and the timing of something, like years down the road, it's like, you're always like, oh my gosh, like we may have never even crossed paths. It just happened to be a perfect thing. But I got here last year around September, and this guy started coming to our church, and he had just gotten in AA and was he was recovering from being an alcoholic. Started coming to our church. I won't tell the whole backstory, although it's an incredible story. But he started coming, and then I would see him on a Sunday, say hi to him. And then one day I finally struck up a conversation with him, and then I didn't see him for a while, and I kind of forgot, in the hustle and bustle of life, it's hard to just remember one singular person on a Sunday, as you know. And so I remembered him recently. He shot me a text message a couple months back, said, hey, I want to get baptized. So he got baptized here at Compass, right? And so I finally got to sit down with him and have a one-on-one conversation this weekend. And I didn't know that, I knew that he used to struggle with being an alcoholic. I did not know that he had gotten into AA the same month that I met him, AKA the same month that I moved here. And so it was but him and I were talking about this, and I was like, I've never asked you this before. How old are you? And I legitimately thought this guy was, he's so mature now in the way he carries himself. I thought he was in his late 30s. I thought he was about 36, 37. He's like, dude, I'm 28 years old. So he's only a year older than me. And so we started talking about stuff, but he's gone through 6 tours in Afghanistan. He got out of the military. But his life was it was hell. His past is hell. His past, who he used to be, is not the person. And that's what he said. He was like, if I would have met you at any time before I did meet you initially, he was like, you would not, it's not the person that I used to be, essentially. He was like, I've changed. I'm different.
Yeah.
And now being baptized, and having this faith in Jesus. And so I guess my encouragement through all that is this, for anybody that is listening, as Brandon said, that's going through struggling with the past, if you've been made new and you've been set free by Christ, you don't have just a better life, you got a brand new life.
Yeah.
So walk in the newness of life. You can't go back to somebody that no longer exists.
Yeah.
Like you're a new being, you're a new creation. And I know that sounds kind of like, and I don't know what the word I want to throw out there is it can sound a little just like, oh yeah, you're new, like carry on, don't struggle with your past anymore. You're going to still struggle with it, but I want to encourage you that you're not even the same person anymore. So walk in your newness of life.
So that's a great segue because I'm thinking about new identity in Maverick, right? Like there's this incredible scene where Tom Cruise sees the one and only Val Kilmer as
Iceman.
Iceman.
Come on.
The Iceman.
Come on.
The
The
Iceman.
Carlson guy. Iceman.
What is your name again? Asuga?
Iceman. Asuga?
Ahsoka. Close.
Some nerdy
Close.
Star
How
Wars.
dare you, 28-year-old punk.
27.
27.
27, that's even worse.
That's even worse.
Sorry, Asuga.
But he goes and he sees Val Kilmer, who I'd been waiting to see like the whole film. I'm like, where's Val Kilmer? Where's Iceman? Where's Iceman? And he
Batman.
The Saints.
Sorry.
The Saints.
That's how
What a
I know
great
Val
movie.
Kilmer.
Val Kilmer was in The Saints.
Oh, so
Wow.
good.
Wow.
And I didn't know that Val Kilmer actually had throat cancer. Did you guys know this?
I did.
He actually had throat cancer. So he had actually lost his ability to speak effectively. So when they filmed his scene for this movie,
It was real. That was real. That was the deal.
yeah, but they had to specialize something in like voice synthesis. So they had to digitally recreate his voice using AI technology
Wow.
with what he was trying to say. And they used archived audio recordings of his voice to make those scenes,
That's fascinating.
which is just nuts to me. But, he's suffering from terminal throat cancer in the film. And what does he say to Maverick on the computer? He has this great line. Like Maverick's like, I'm a fighter pilot. I'm not a trainer. I'm not a teacher. I'm a fighter pilot. And what does Val Kilmer write on that computer? You remember?
Does he say it's time to let go?
It's
Yeah.
time to let go.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not a teacher, Ice. I'm a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And then he ends up creating this new identity for himself where he becomes kind of the lead for that mission. So you think about it, Maverick undergoes this transformation, right?
Mhm.
I mean, he's embracing this new identity. Was there a period in your life when you had to redefine yourself or let go of an old identity to, pursue something new?
Mm.
I'm a church planner by trade, I guess you could say. I'm a pastor's kid, so I've been raised around church my entire life. And then in 2019, I planted a church right before a global pandemic. It was a great idea. Didn't know what was going to happen. Wound up having to close that down. And what I learned in that is that my identity was in the plant, in like the building of the church and the platform. And when all of that dissolved, I experienced what I would consider like real crisis in my life because I had spent my life building up to this moment. From 2011 to 2019, I'm going to plant a church. I'm going to plant a church. I'm going to plant a church. Well, when you build your identity on that and then it all disappears in just a couple of weeks, you start to think, what am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? So I went through, during the pandemic, I delivered packages for a parcel company from like 4:45 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night.
Yep.
And then I eventually got a job as a drug rep. I was a legal drug dealer to people who were in pharmaceutical needs.
You were, excuse me, we have a drug dealer?
Yeah, legal. It was legal.
Welcome to Compass.
He's working in Colorado.
and then I worked for a home health company, essentially doing the same thing. And what I had realized is that regardless of what I was doing, I had built my identity solely on pastoring. And so when I found Compass very broken, a little bit angry, kind of ticked off at God. And I walked into Compass. I'll never forget this. I walked into Compass the first Sunday and I walked in and I said, God, this is supposed to be me. Like, I'm supposed to have this building. I'm supposed to have this worship team. I'm supposed to be the guy on the platform. I essentially gave up my life for you. And this was my repayment. No church. I had lost family. I'd lost everything in the midst of the pandemic. And what I realized in that is that I built my identity on pastoring. And the unfortunate part is that anytime you build your identity on something other than Christ, the likelihood is that it's going to crumble at some point in time. You cannot carry that weight on your own. And so now I found myself back into pastoring again for whatever reason, Brandon Beard, who offered me a job. And sometimes I even laugh at that because there's still times going back to that past thing. Sometimes I am like, oh man, should I be in the role that I'm in?
I'll go a step further. You even said that.
Yeah.
So when you interviewed and we talked about the job, you said, man, I'm not even sure I deserve this.
Yeah.
That's where you were.
Mm-hmm.
You were trying to, and we had many conversations of like, this just what we're talking about. Like, dude, you're not defined by your past. You can't let that determine your whole future. And you pressed on. I love it.
I heard this said one time that a career is what you get paid to do, but a calling is what you're made to do. And for me, walking back into the church was not, it wasn't a career move. I was a drug rep for a company. It was the opposite of a career move, but it was into a calling. And that was to navigate people to God and help others discover their purpose and just to live my life for Jesus for the rest of my life. And whatever that looks like, I know now that I won't build my life on my title. Mm-hmm. And because the moment that I do is when that all comes crumbling down.
Mm. That's really interesting. I didn't know that about you.
No, I didn't either.
Yeah.
Drug dealer.
Brandon, can we plant a campus up in Colorado?
I was fantastic at it too.
I think we know a guy that would be a great campus pastor up there.
I'm a legal drug dealer.
Yeah.
I get it. He's a drug rep.
Yeah.
Joke's over.
It's over. You can stop now.
It wasn't funny, but I tried.
Soka.
One thing I like to consistently remind not just students, but just anyone that has struggling with identity issues or trying to understand their purpose is your purpose is never going to be attached to an occupation. It's just never, that can't be the deal. So exactly what you just said. Mm-hmm. But the people who I've seen that are the healthiest that have gone before me and conversations that we had are people who never cared about what it had to do with what they did for a living, but rather where they worked from. You know, they worked from a place of being a son or a daughter. And they worked from a place, not for a place. We can get really locked into a title. We can get really locked into a deal. It's like, hey, that's our youth pastor. All he does is youth. It's like, we can do more than that. You know, hey, that's our executive pastor. All he does is have 65 meetings in a day. It's like, he's more than that. When you operate from a place of security and who God's called you to be, and it's not in an occupation versus for it.
That's so different. Good. It's like your calling is Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not worship. Like we say, we hear people say, my calling is to be a worship pastor. My calling is to be a teacher, preacher, right? And it's like, no, that's not your calling. Your calling is Jesus, right? That's just what you're good at.
That's what you're good at. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that so scripturally, Psalm 1, so I think the Bible does two things oftentimes. It describes and it prescribes.
Yes.
So it does two things. So Psalm 139 describes that we are fearfully, remarkably, wondrously made in the image of Christ. That's try to be a super Christian, but the theological term for imago Dei, image of God.
Look at
and then you have, I know, who knew? Who knew I went to Bible school?
We got a guy on the team who knows
drug dealers over here.
Drug dealer knows
breaking
the Bible.
down scripture.
Drew and I are over here on Bible.com just trying to find a verse to say in the podcast.
But then so you get description, but Ephesians 2 prescribes what we should do, that you were created to produce good works on the earth and that God created that beforehand. So before he even created you, he knew the works that he created you for. And so I think that in our terms, oftentimes we only use biblical language as descriptive language.
Right.
But there's a prescription on hey, here's how you should live your life. Mm-hmm. And I think that you're right. Drew, more times than not, purpose, it really starts from a place of being son, daughter, fearfully, wonderfully made in God's image. And that Ephesians 2 would say that you're prescribed to do these good things because I've made you in this image.
And I think this identity conversation can get really confusing for people who hear it too, because they can go, so wait a second. I have been in the insurance industry my whole life, and I do insurance, and like that's kind of been my identity. And everyone in town knows I'm the insurance guy or I'm the insurance lady. You know, that's what I do. I'm known in the community as that. And I would say to someone who's listening to that, absolutely, that's right. Just when it comes to identity, just make sure that people know you first and foremost as a follower of Jesus, as someone who's kind, as someone who's, so you're not just the insurance person. You're like, oh man, that person is faithful.
Yeah.
They're faithful to Jesus. And then the success of your business, say it's really successful, doesn't go to your head. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. It's okay to have an identity in the sense of like, it's not, yes, what Drew was saying is true. You don't put your full identity in your occupation. Like I am, I don't know if many people actually, I mean, some people do. I don't think anyone's like, that's my whole life. Everything I'm doing is I'm just using that example. I'm an insurance person, but I think it is making sure that doesn't consume us. The success or failure of that, I'm super successful at that. And then your head explodes because you're this and that. It's like, no, God's everything that you've received as a blessing from God. And so walking that identity it doesn't mean leaving your job. It doesn't mean everyone has to become a pastor or become a Bible teacher or anything like that. It just means like, man, everything you're doing is in Christ. And that means I'm going to treat my employees with kindness. I'm not just going to be that insurance person who's shows up at church and has a smile on my face. The people that I work with are going to know by the way I treat them that I love them, that Jesus is flowing through me in everywhere I do. And I think that gets really confused sometimes because people are like, what am I supposed to just quit my job? I can't have my identity in anything. It's like, no, my dad ran a construction company. And he did it with integrity, and he did it differently, and he looked different and felt different than, his job sites felt different than any other job site, which was wild because he was a man of faith who put Jesus first. His identity was not in the business. It was first and foremost in Christ, but he was a dang good contractor. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being amazing at your job. Sure. And killing it.
And I hope somebody listening to this podcast, and we can move on, but I hope somebody listening to this podcast maybe try to just see and ask God, pray and seek the Lord and be like, God, what else have you gifted me in other areas? And how could I use that to further advance your kingdom and reach a whole different demographic of people that I never thought I'd reach before?
Well, and that's a great theme of Maverick, which is overcoming limits.
Right.
It's like, man, God's maybe called me to this thing. I'm being led into this new area, maybe this to take a next step, right? So, Maverick in that same way pushes beyond his limits to show others what's possible. There's an incredible scene where they're watching and he goes solo to show them that he can go, 10 G's and then goes up skull cliff. What's it called? Coffin cliff or whatever it is. And hits the bullseye, coffin corner, hits the bullseye. But he shows them that it's possible, that they can complete this mission. So I'm wondering from you guys, or maybe it's somebody have you ever had an experience where you had to push beyond your perceived limits? And what did you learn from that experience?
I know for me, when I talk about pushing myself beyond my limits, this is going to sound really odd, I think, to you, but I think you'll get it. For me, it's asking for help. For me in my life, that's always been, it's not been like oh man, can I work this hard or can I strain to do this or do I need, it just, honestly, I get to a point in my life, my wife and I about 11 years ago just went through a really rough stretch and we just were trying so hard to work it out ourselves in these long conversations and fights and struggle and conflict. And it's like, I've spent my whole life telling people hey, you might want to get some help. You might want to ask for help. That's the key. I always tell people, man, that's the key to marriage. You gotta love, you gotta forgive, you gotta ask for help. But you talk about pushing beyond my limits. My limit was I'm not asking for help. I don't need help.
Yeah.
I could fix this myself. I do not need the help of someone else. And to actually stop, it was way beyond my limit to make that phone call and go, hey, I think I'd like to make an appointment to sit down with my wife and this other person and this counselor and just talk, the three of us.
Wow.
and it was really beneficial. And I hated it every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no part of me that was like, this is awesome. I get to go spend money, waste time in my mind, spend money, waste time, and have some quote unquote shrink just nod their head while we talk. And you're
Yeah.
like, this is a huge waste of my time. But the reality was that was my limit. The limit was my pride. It was
Mhm.
holding me back from going like,
Yeah.
hey, I need to get some help. And we did. We got some help. We went through that. And we look back at that season now and we're like, that was just good. It was not fun, but it was good. And it was way beyond the limit that I had. For me, I'm like, there's no way. I'm not doing this.
And it's crazy that you say that because it's so kingdom minded. And I know that it feels weird to say that, but it's like, it's almost like in order to get stronger, you have to become weaker. And is that not the kingdom? It's like Jesus said, you want to go, if you want to be first, you need to be last. Like if you want to be up, you need to lay yourself down. It's just everything about the kingdom's backwards. So it's so true that, you know what I mean? Like you're like, I hated it because I had to admit that I was wrong, and you had to admit that you sucked and you can't do it yourself, and that you're weak. But yet through all of that, you got stronger, which is the kingdom. It's always going to be, you want to be the greatest, serve, you know what I mean? Like wash feet, which is like, you know what I mean? It's just,
I just think so much of what we talk about, whether it's on these podcasts or in our groups at church or on the weekends, everything sounds so like easy, you know, like, oh, this is great.
Pray more.
Yeah. Pray more. God can overcome. Get a new Bible reading plan, this and that. But when you actually have to like, spend money to get help, or when you have to acknowledge like, oh, you can't do it yourself, that's a limit for, that's a hard thing for me because I'm a very prideful person. I'm not proud of that, but I am a very prideful person of like, I can do this. I can carry most things on my shoulders in my mind.
Right.
It's just not true. And that's a limiting thing. And I think that's true for a lot of people. That's their limit. They can conquer the world, start a business and just blow it up, but they can't humble themselves and ask for help.
Yeah.
So on that, another big theme with Maverick is rescuing others, right? There's this great scene where Maverick sacrifices his life to save, I keep wanting to say Goose, but it's Rooster.
It's Rooster.
Rooster.
Get it right,
He
Brooks.
keeps wanting to say it's Rooster.
Goose is gone, Brooks.
I know.
He's
It's
gone.
just,
It's time to let go.
It's time to let go.
Hey, I did notice in the movie, the guy that plays Rooster was also in
Miles
the reboot of Footloose. He was the skinny kid in Footloose, and it kind of hit me in the middle of the movie. I was like, hold on. He had a cowboy hat on, was always, just random
He looks like he could be from the 80s.
Yeah.
Dude, Miles
sure.
Teller
That vibe
is,
well, I guess.
is of the man.
That
I love Miles
mustache
Teller.
is amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Miles Teller moment.
Miles Teller moment. So what ways, do you believe individuals can rescue or help others who are struggling with their past and seeking a new beginning?
I think Brandon hit it on the head. I think until you recognize that you don't have it all together, it's hard to help people who don't have it all together. And so often in the pastor world, we feel like that we've got to be the answer to people's problems. And the reality is that I have problems. All four of us have problems. And I think it's so freeing for me to be like, I don't know. I don't know how to help you. But I can walk alongside you and I can listen. I think the best thing I've learned in helping others when it comes to situations in their life or their struggle is not to give advice, but to live advice. And that's just by listening.
That's great. I love that.
I'm going to live this out with you. I'm not going to say anything, but I'm going to walk with you. Because in my darkest times, whether it be my parents passing away, whatever it may be, there's nothing that anybody can say that's going to make that better. But if they'll just walk alongside, and that's one of the things I've learned about pastoring and shepherding over the last several years, is just walking alongside people and not necessarily having the answer to everything, but listening. And it's saved me so much energy and headache to not realize that I have to have every single answer for somebody.
I would say too, just on the, how do we, help people? How do we fix,
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what Mitch is saying. Just stop trying to fix people, stop trying to fix everybody.
Yeah.
We all do it. We all do it. Especially if you're a married man, you do it. There's a problem come up in your family and you're like, I will fix this.
Yep.
I have the answer. And everyone knows, like, shut your mouth and listen. Shut it. Just be quiet and listen and be loving and be caring. Don't try and fix it.
I think the best advice I've given to somebody that's going through a hard thing, the best thing I've ever said is nothing.
Yeah.
Just the ministry of presence.
Love that.
Just sitting in and just going, this sucks. Yeah. My viewpoint on you is not going to change, whatever goes from here.
So what does it look like to let go and surrender? Because we see Maverick do this at the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it. I'm not playing. I hate it. I hate
I'm
letting go and surrender. I don't like to do it. So what does it look like? I think it looks like dropping your pride and saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to turn this over to you, whether it be finances. And I know, like, hey, I feel the Holy Spirit is calling me to give more financially. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I have some stuff on my list I want to do. And if I don't do that, if I give and do that, then I'm not going to get what I want. I'm not going to get to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like, no, God's calling you to do that. Or if I'm going to let go of something pridefully, I'm going to forgive someone or let them off the hook, or I'm going to stop holding a grudge or whatever. It's more fun to hold a grudge.
Mm-hmm.
People always say when you hold unforgiveness is like hurting yourself. And I'm like,
it feels good.
I'm sorry, but it feels good to hold on.
Yeah.
It feels like I will be the person who produces justice in this situation by my action somehow. It's hard to let go. So what does it look like to let go? For me, Brooks, it looks like dropping my pride and saying, okay, even if I don't feel like it, even if in my heart I feel like there's a better way, I'm going to choose your way, God. I'm going to go with what you want. It's the Garden of Gethsemane moment. Jesus says, not my will, but your will be done. And I think I'd love to know, like, the way that Jesus said that. I'd love to know, like, because I don't know, but my guess is he wasn't like a Precious Moments doll sitting in the Garden of Gethsemane going, not my will, but your will be done. I think my guess is that Jesus was like, he says it, is there any other way?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any? And then he says, you know what? Not my will, but your will. I just feel like that was a straining moment for Jesus. I don't think that was like, not my will, but your will be.
Yeah.
I just think
God.
Sure, God. And I think that's, for me, that's what it looks like. It leans to live in that struggle and truly surrender and just give up your pride and let it go.
Love that.
Yeah.
For me, it's all about walking in humility.
Mm-hmm.
Easier said than done.
Yep.
But that's how I see it. And I struggle. I am not a humble person by nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's something that I have to work on every single day.
Yeah, people don't go on Instagram and post like, hey, 30-second consecutive visit to AA meetings.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we just brag
Yeah,
about the
right.
good stuff we're doing. I'm like, look
Yeah.
at my kid, he's awesome. Or look at how great our family is, you know?
Yeah.
But you're not like, hey, walking into the counselor's office for the 10th time in
Right.
the last year, you know? Like
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, what's wrong with you?
My kid scores 2 points in a basketball game. I don't put all the ones that she missed in a game.
Yeah,
It's
right,
it's just,
right.
You just go nuts, right? Go nuts.
She's
Post the
amazing.
highlights.
Yeah, you
Post
post
the
the
highlights.
highlights.
Picture of your wife. We just got in a huge fight.
Yeah, exactly. Headed to counseling for the 5th time this year.
Yeah. Screenshot of my bank account.
Screenshot of my bank
negative.
account. Yes,
Look
negative.
at this.
Yes.
The
Just
Lord's
spent-
been blessing us.
Just spent $165 to sit with someone for an hour and unload my stuff. It's just, let's be real about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is awesome to let go. And it is, like Mitch said, it is awesome to give this stuff over to God. But it is not easy. And it would be so disingenuous for on this podcast to be like, just trust him. It'll all work out. Like, no, sometimes it doesn't.
Mhm.
Sometimes it goes really south. It's really hard. Sometimes your parents get sick, right? Sometimes your kids get sick, whatever it is. Or sometimes your own decisions just burn you
Mm-hmm.
and you suffer the consequences of
Right.
that. There's no escaping those.
Yeah.
And there's probably someone listening. You're in the same boat
Absolutely.
and you want that instantaneous, like snap your fingers, have this emotional experience at church or somehow go, during your morning devotions, reading the Bible, and it's all going to go away. And it's like, not to be negative, it probably won't. But God is truly going to do something awesome through that what you're going through. If you surrender to him, and if you don't, just it's gonna burn you. You got to let go, trust him, and move forward.
As Val Kilmer so wisely puts in the computer,
It's time to let
it's
go.
time to let go.
I love it. Yeah.
And he says, "Who's the better pilot, me or you?" And he goes, "This is not the time for that."
Yeah, because he couldn't let go.
Yeah.
He couldn't let go.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. This was awesome. This is a great conversation. So thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Mitch. And well, I'm sure we'll have you guys back on here real soon.
Call sign Ahsoka.
Oh, yeah. Ahsoka, Shooter, and Responder. And Wolfhound.
Wolfhound, Bird Dog.
Is it Wolfhound?
No, it was Bird Dog.
Bird Dog?
And then it was
Yeah, I
Wolf
give up.
Dog is what you said.
We should have practiced the call signs.
Yeah, way to throw us under the bus.
We really failed.
Thank you for listening in on this episode of the Compass Podcast. Remember that every Monday we will launch a new episode. We look forward to seeing you, and make sure you subscribe.